Hello and welcome back to the UiPath Integration Service video series. In this video, we'll guide you through the high-level process of building a custom connector using the Connector Builder. The Connector Builder for Integration Service enables us to create custom connectors using API technology, allowing seamless integration with any desired application. To begin, you can either click on the Add a New Connector button or select the Connector Builder option located on the top right side of the page. Here, we can find a list of custom connectors that have already been created. Use the filter to view only the published or unpublished connectors. Since we want to create a new connector, all you need to do is click on the New Connector button. Two options are available, starting from an API definition or building from scratch blank connector. Before we proceed to the next step, let's take a moment to understand what an API definition is. An API definition serves as a document or specification that outlines the functionality, endpoints, data structures, and protocols of an API. It provides developers with a clear understanding of how to interact with the API and leverage its capabilities. Common formats for API definitions include Swagger or Postman collections. These formats ensure that developers can easily comprehend and work with the API in a standardized manner. Our Connector Builder supports both Swagger and Postman collections. Alright, now you might be wondering when to choose between starting from an API definition or building from scratch with a blank connector. Choose the API definition option if you have a well-defined API specification in formats like Swagger or Postman collections. It saves time and it ensures consistency with the API specification. Opt for the Building from Scratch option if you don't have an existing API definition or you want complete customization and flexibility for your connector. For more information on API definitions and working with them, refer to the Swagger specification and the Postman Learning Center. You can find the links to these resources at the end of the lesson. Since we have all of the necessary details, let's proceed with the API definition option. Next, we can either select an API definition stored locally or specify a URL. Let's use the Pet Store API collection by copying the link. Paste the API link and click Continue. We can now see all of the resources found in the API definition. Next, provide a name for your connector as well as the application name. These details will be displayed on the connectors page after publishing. Let's click Create. Excellent, your connector has been created. From the Info tab, we can change the provider's name, application name, display name, and add a description. You can even customize the connector icon. Please note that only REST API types are supported now. Now let's move to the Base API tab. Here, we'll need to specify the full base URL. The Base API refers to the base URL or endpoint of the API that you're integrating with. It's the starting point or root URL that serves as the foundation for all API requests. The base API typically encompasses the domain name and any other path or versioning information. When configuring the connector, specifying the base API is essential as it sets up the primary location from which subsequent API calls will be made. By setting the correct base API, the connector knows where to send requests and retrieve responses from the target API. Let's adjust the URL and click on the Save button. Next, let's set the authentication method. You have several options to choose from. Basic, OAuth 2.0 with the authorization code, authorization code with PKCE and client credentials, API key, personal access token, PAT, no authentication. These methods provide various ways to authenticate and secure access to the connector. You can choose the appropriate authentication method based on the requirements and security considerations of the API or application that you're integrating with. When configuring the authentication, it's important to note that you're setting up the authentication method for anyone who uses your connector. Initially, this includes yourself as you build the connector. However, it's essential to consider that others may also utilize your connector in the future. By defining the authentication method during configuration, you ensure that all users, including yourself and potential users, authenticate properly when interacting with the connector. Refer to the documentation page for a detailed explanation of each method. Let's choose the API key option for authentication. We'll select the Ask User option for the value of the API key. Now that we've completed the authentication configuration, let's proceed by selecting Add Connection from the drop-down menu. It's important to ensure that the connection is established successfully before moving on to the next steps. This confirmation ensures that our custom connector is ready to seamlessly interact with the desired API. Now we need to enter the API key. Note that the API key is typically obtained by following the specific instructions provided by the API provider or the system that you're integrating with. You may need to register your application or account on the developer portal or API management platform to receive the API key. Remember to securely store the API key as it serves as a unique identifier for your application's access to the API. Treat it as sensitive information and avoid sharing it publicly. Let's add the API secure key and click Connect. With the connection successfully added and the status showing connected, we're now ready to proceed further and utilize our custom connector. Let's continue to the next step. Now that we've completed the necessary setup, we can start leveraging the capabilities of our custom connector. On the left side menu, you'll find the list of available resources conveniently organized into groups. Now let's start by selecting the Get by ID option from the available choices. By choosing Get by ID, we can retrieve detailed information about a specific pet based on its unique identifier. Next, let's proceed by selecting the User option. Here, we can view various details related to the user. This information provides us with access to valuable user-related data from the connected API. Here, we can view various details. This information allows us to access and utilize the desired pet-related data from the connected API. After we've built all of the resources for our connector, it's time to publish it. Let's click on the Publish button. Next, we need to specify the documentation URL and review the description. Once we're satisfied with the details, click the Publish button. And congratulations, our connector has been successfully published. Now let's explore how we can use our custom connector in UiPath Studio. Let's start by installing the Connector Builder activity package. To do this, navigate to Manage Packages in UiPath Studio. Next, search for Connector and select Connector Builder by UiPath to install the package. Fantastic! Now we have access to all of the Connector Builder activities within UiPath Studio. Now let's look at the available activities for the Connector Builder in UiPath Studio. From the Activities panel, navigate to the Integration Service section. Within the Integration Service section, we have the Connector Builder activities. These activities provide you with the necessary building blocks to interact with your custom connector and leverage its functionalities. Let's take an example activity, such as the Get Record activity, to demonstrate the usage of the custom connector. Let's proceed by selecting the connector that we created from the available options and choose a default connection. Next, specify the pet ID. To store the value retrieved from the operation, let's create a variable in the output field. As an output, we receive the pet object, which contains all of the available properties such as category ID, category name, status, URLs, tags, and the pet's ID. Now let's add a log message activity to extract the name property. Here we can see all of the available properties such as category ID, category name, status, URLs, tags, and the pet's ID. Let's select the name property. And now let's run the workflow. Here we can see the pet name. We have successfully obtained the pet's name using the custom connector. Feel free to explore other available properties, such as the category ID, category name, status, URLs, tags, and the pet's ID. Congratulations! In this video, we've learned how to build our custom connector, publish it, and make use of it in our automation project within UiPath Studio. Thank you for watching the video and happy automation!